Well, these days I'm best known for the critique of foreign aid to lift poor areas of the world, like Africa, out of poverty. Um, and that critique is, comes from kind of bitter experience. I spent 16 years at the World Bank working to fight world poverty as very much an idealist, wanting to help the world's poor. And really seeing a lot of those efforts fail. A lot of the official foreign aid efforts fail to help the world's poor. I saw, $2.3 trillion spent on foreign aid over the last 50 years. And I saw the results of that in World Bank trips that I went on that were just nightmares of bureaucracy and ineffective, experts flying in and thinking that they were experts in problems of Africans after spending a week in a luxury hotel room in Africa. Frankly, there was a moment of disillusionment, and then there was a desire to change things. A desire to change the foreign aid system so that it would work better, so that more of that $2.3 trillion that's been spent over the last 50 years would reach poor people, and not be, dissipated in luxury missions from World Bank headquarters or in ineffective government bureaucracies on the other end. The critical thing that makes foreign aid fail so often, and this is really heartbreaking, is simply that the poor, who are the intended customers of foreign aid, just like you are the intended customer of the Pepsi Corporation when they sell you Pepsis. But unlike your relationship with Pepsi, the poor have no right to complain and no right to turn down the product if they don't like it. The poor just get foreign aid foisted on them by these ill-informed experts, and there's no feedback from the poor, whether they're satisfied or not, whether the money even reached them or not. There's no accountability on the part of these official aid agencies for whether they got the money to the poor, whether they made the poor better off by getting them a drink of clean water when they previously didn't have access to clean water, or by getting them an essential immunization to prevent their child getting measles, or to get them a bed net to prevent them from being bit by a malarial mosquito. There's no accountability for these basic things, and so these basic things don't happen. Where there are no incentives and no accountability, then that's another insight of economics. Then it doesn't happen, and that's indeed what it has happened in foreign aid. Tragically, it has not happened. The money gets sort of leaks out all along the chain that starts in Washington and New York with the United Nations or the World Bank or other official aid agencies. And it gets sort of lost all along the way because there's on the part of the rich country public, they're mainly concerned with how much aid money is spent, and then they're satisfied. Well, we spent $2.3 trillion to help the world's poor, so our job is done. And they pretty much stop paying attention after the money is spent. So with a long chain of officials in charge of the money, with no one looking over their shoulder to see how they're spending it, there's plenty of ways that it leaks. It leaks into expensive salaries for the people working in headquarters, like me. I have to admit I was one of those who benefited from this gravy train. There's all the administrative costs in which huge amounts of money are wasted of the official aid agencies. The World Bank has a budget of $1 billion to help the world's poor, even though it only disperses about $7 billion in aid to help the world's poor. It has an administrative budget of $1 billion. Then the money is given to the government in the poor country, and then the money there either gets dissipated in ineffective bureaucracy, where it's just paying the salaries of unmotivated civil servants who have no incentive to help the poor, or it's outright stolen through corrupt officials. There's an estimate that something like 40 to 60% of drugs meant for health clinics in West Africa get stolen before they ever reach the clinics and get sold on the free market, on the black market. So that's where the money disappears. And then, at the end of the day, unfortunately, nobody seems to care. That's the tragedy that breaks my heart over and over again, that no one cares that this money is not actually reaching the most desperate people in the world for whom it is intended, people who live on less than $1 a day. You know, it's just an unbelievable measure of deprivation, people living on less than $1 a day. And that's who the money was intended for, but it never reached them. Well, people just assume that, you know, if the money is budgeted for helping the poor, that it goes to help the poor. You know, unfortunately, there's not a very strong incentive to, if you're just the average taxpayer in the U.S. or in Europe, there's not much incentive to investigate, you know, whether some poor village off in Ghana, West Africa, received the money or not. You can't, you know, mount your own investigation and find out. The press, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have enough motivation to really dig deep into whether the money reaches the poor, because they mainly providing stories for U.S. consumption that are mostly about, you know, disasters striking Africa, wars and earthquakes and famines and droughts, and not about the more kind of pedestrian matter of, you know, did a dollar of aid money get to a baby in time to give them a rehydration treatment so they wouldn't die from dehydration due to a disease that kills 2 million babies a year due to dehydration.